When you have the worst season in franchise history, go on a 28-game losing streak, and you're simply the laughingstock of the NBA, we all know that following offseason, some big changes are coming to the organization. And in this case of the Detroit Pistons, we didn't see those dramatic changes happen to the roster itself, but we seen the dramatic changes take place upstairs in the front office. Former general manager Troy Weaver, he was relieved of his duties and essentially replaced by Trajan Langdon, who's now the president of basketball operations. And we also seen Coach Monte Williams be replaced by JB Bickerstaff, and that's substantial because when the Detroit Pistons, when we hired Monte Williams, we made him the highest paid coach in NBA history. He also, you go look at Monte Williams' contract, he had some crazy incentives, some crazy guaranteed incentives in his contract, and now after just 1 year, one terrible year with the Detroit Pistons, he's retired. I believe they owe him $65 million. So Monte Williams, he might not ever have to work a day in his life again if he doesn't want to. But nonetheless, we saw the Detroit Pistons make some big time changes, and with hiring a new president of basketball operations, bringing in Trajan Langdon, the Detroit Pistons are once again on a new timeline, because now we're on the timeline of Trajan Langdon. Now we're putting a whole new plan into set. And if I'm being honest, I kind of like the plan of Trajan Langdon, because like Trajan Langdon, I also believe in the young talent on this team, the young talent that's been accumulated in the NBA draft over the last couple of years. Obviously, our biggest player, our best player is Cade Cunningham, but we also have guys with tremendous upside like Jaden Ivey, who has shown flashes that he could be a great player in the NBA. Jalen Duren has shown great flashes that he could be a great player in the NBA. Same thing with Asori Thompson. We look at what we got in this year's draft, Ron Holland. So the young talent is there on the Detroit Pistons. And Trajan Langdon, he said right now, he wants to focus on the development of this young talent. And what he did this offseason, like we said earlier, we didn't see no dramatic changes with the roster itself, no loud moves for the Detroit Pistons, but I think they did make little moves that will have big impact for the Detroit Pistons. And we can start off with the new players that they added this offseason. And we look at over the last couple of years what has been the biggest problems with the Detroit Pistons, and in no particular order, we can say the defense, we can say the lack of shooting, and we could also say the injuries. And I think the injuries have been the biggest plague of the Detroit Pistons these last few years. We look at some of the better players that were supposed to help the younger guys develop. We look at Jeremy Grant, who wasn't the healthiest when he was with the Detroit Pistons, and we also look at Bogdan Bogdanovic, who wasn't the healthiest when he played for the Detroit Pistons, especially this past season. So those two guys right there who could have played big roles in playing alongside Cade Cunningham, playing alongside Jaden Ivey, those guys weren't available when the Detroit Pistons needed them to be the most. So we take that into account, and we look at some of the guys that Trajan Langdon has added this offseason. I think he did an amazing job, starting with Tobias Harris. And Tobias Harris, I believe he was signed on a 2-year, $50+ million deal. I forget the exact number. And I feel like I've seen some people saying that the Detroit Pistons, they paid too much for Tobias Harris. And I don't think that's true at all. When you look at the bigger picture, it's a 2-year deal, so it's not a long-term deal. And also, it's not like the Detroit Pistons are about to go out and win a championship. Where else were they going to put that money into? I like that they went out and was aggressive, and they went out and got a player who will hit on some of those boxes that we just talked about that has been a struggle for so long. We look at the player that Tobias Harris is. He's relatively healthy over the entirety of his NBA career. Has never been a player known to miss games. He's in the lineup each and every night. He might miss a game or two every now and then, but nothing long term. And then he also, aside from the availability, if I'm being honest, we're getting a lot more out of Tobias Harris, and we all know he doesn't have the best track record in the NBA playoffs, but all in all, looking at his skill set, he's a really good NBA basketball player, and I can't wait to see him alongside Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham. But nonetheless, what we know we're going to get from Tobias Harris is a guaranteed 16 to 20 points per game, and last year we didn't have that from anybody outside of Cade Cunningham, so we're getting an additional scorer, which we should love. And then also he has the ability to space the floor, and when we have guys who are great at getting downhill, Asar Thompson, Ron Holland, Jalen Ivey, Cade Cunningham, we're going to need guys in those deep corners that can knock down three-point shots, and Tobias Harris, he is really good at that. He can shoot the tray ball, and his hot spot is probably in those two deep corners, but he can also knock it down from the wing and the top of the key. And then Tobias Harris can just get a bucket from all three levels past the three-point line. He has a really good mid-range pull-up. He has the mid-range fade. He has post-game. He can blow by bigger defenders, and he can punish smaller players in the post. He's a really solid offensive player. So I love the addition of Tobias Harris. We also look at the addition of Malik Beasley, another short-term deal. So it's not like the Detroit Pistons are putting long-term money up into a role player like Malik Beasley, but it's just a one-year deal. If they don't like his services after this year, they can let go of him. But Malik Beasley, he's another player that's consistent. When it comes to playing, and he can knock down the three-point shot. And Malik Beasley, when he's on teams where he has more opportunity, where he is a volume shooter, he's at the top of the list each and every year when it comes to three-pointers made. When he played with the Utah Jazz, and when he played with the Minnesota Timberwolves before they were elite as they are right now, he was getting three-point shots up, he was taking them, and he was making them. So I'm hoping that he can come to the Detroit Pistons, a team where he should see a lot of three-point shot attempts. I'm hoping he can continue to knock them down for our team. So I love the addition of Malik Beasley and Tobias Harris, and I think these guys are going to do great jobs spacing the floor next season for the Detroit Pistons, alongside all the other things they bring to the game of basketball. Can't forget about Tim Hardaway Jr. Now, I think the other guys, with their ability and their consistency with shooting the three-point shot, I think they're going to have guaranteed spots in the rotation. With Tim Hardaway Jr., I think he might have to compete a little bit. And don't let me disrespect Tim Hardaway Jr. Over the last 4 or 5 seasons in the NBA, he has averaged 15 points per game. So who knows? He might have a spot in that rotation. But if I had to choose 2 out of those 3 guys, I would choose Malik Beasley, and I will also choose Tobias Harris. But you guys let me know if you think Tim Hardaway Jr. is going to see some minutes this season. Or I know he's going to see some minutes, but do you think he's going to have a permanent spot in that rotation? But nonetheless, moving on, I think those right there, they're very subtle moves. They're not picking up Paul George. They're not trading for Kristaps Porzingis, but they are subtle moves that I think will have impact. And then another thing I think was slept on was the addition of Coach J.B. Bickerstaff. Now, we know J.B. Bickerstaff is a little bit different with Monte Williams. We know J.B. Bickerstaff, he has experience coaching younger teams. The Cleveland Cavaliers, when J.B. Bickerstaff was hired, they were a rebuilding team just like the Detroit Pistons. So he has experience in that area. And then another thing about J.B. Bickerstaff teams, they always finish in the top half. They always finish in the top half of the defense in defensive rating. And then the last couple of years, the Cleveland Cavaliers has had one of the best defenses in the NBA. So he knows his X's and O's on the defensive side of the ball, offensively too. But he's a defensive specialist. So him bringing in that defensive identity to a young team, it should work wonders for the Detroit Pistons. So I love the addition of Coach J.B. Bickerstaff. And when we look past everything else, now it's really up to the young talent. Oh, did not mean to hit the mic there. But now it's up to the young talent on the Detroit Pistons. If the Detroit Pistons are healthy, if the young talent is healthy, and the new additions are healthy, and then everything that the young core do is going to be under a microscope this season, because there's not going to be no more excuses. We can't blame it on injuries, and we also can't blame it on the lack of spacing or the lack of three-point shooting, because the Detroit Pistons, they have went out and they have acquired some three-point shooters, and they also hired one of the best shot doctors in the NBA, Fred Vincent. So hopefully we can see some improved three-point shooting from Jaden Ivey, Asar Thompson, and Cade Cunningham. Oh, that would be amazing. And Cade Cunningham, he's already a pretty decent three-point shooter in my opinion. And with Jaden Ivey and Asar can become decent three-point shooters, the Detroit Pistons could make a lot of noise next season. But that's how I feel about the Detroit Pistons offseason. Like we established, it wasn't loud, it wasn't crazy, but it was quiet, it was subtle, but I think it would be impactful. You guys let me know what you think down in the comment section. Leave a like if you enjoy, and then please subscribe for more weekly content. We do this all the time, man, and that's curtains.